Hi guys, welcome back to Chaz's No Bullshit Reptile Advice. Today's question comes from Victor Klein. The question simply says, tubs or vivs? Question mark. I feel in your vids you lean viv. Which snakes are most suited to either option? Obviously an active snake or maybe a diurnal snake would benefit from overhead light and could use a glass viv. Maybe an arboreal would be better in a viv. A fossorial or terrestrial snake or that is less active may be suitable for a rack or tub with a heat strip, heat pad, maybe a nocturnal species. I'd like to set up a rack with nice sized containers with maybe aspen and leaf litter and logs, and try to enrich a bit and save space by having a vertical system instead of large glass tanks. Plenty of those already with all the dart frogs I keep in this apartment. So as a reminder for people, Victor is one of the curators at a professional aquarium looking after the dart frog collection. So he's not a beginner keeper, but he's a beginner when it comes to snakes. And it's an interesting question. There will always be some debate going on regarding the application of rack and tub systems. So where to begin? Why would I be leaning this? Okay, let me tubs were initially conceived, rolled out and done for the professional breeders, for the wholesalers, for the importers, for the shops. We have to keep a volume of animals. We need to do it in the most efficient way possible, using the least amount of square footage so that we can fit more animals in per square foot, therefore increase profitability, because at its most base point we are businesses, whereas private hobbyists are not. So the argument isn't there from a financial or efficiency standpoint. People don't talk about this honestly. There's a level of bullshit that permeates this very argument and gets really on my tits, and that is that my royal python likes to live in a plastic box because it lives in termite mounds in the wild. Well, where did you hear that? I read it on my Royal Python forum group. And that is where the main part of the lie is perpetuated, and this is where our issue lies. The argument is made that royal pythons permanently live in termite mounds, and for a period of the year it is true that these animals estivate. Estivate is the opposite of brumate or hibernate. It's too hot, we cannot function, there is a real risk of dehydration or death if we go out and about, so therefore we're going to hole up until the weather becomes more manageable and we can come out. So as their year rolls on, the wet season arrives, the grasses grow, the insects arrive, the mammals arrive, the reptiles will come back out, feed. It's a time of plenty. We're going to have a glut of food. We need to eat as much as we can, because before we know it, it rolls around again, and then we've got our dry season and we need to hole up once more. So this is their cycle. At no point is the living in a burrow a permanent solution for their life. Male royal pythons are known to be semi-arboreal. So why on earth have we decided that racking systems are the best solution for housing this species? They do not live in burrows in perpetuity. They don't. Don't lie about it. You're talking bollocks. If that is what you're going to come up with as your argument, don't even bother. And this is where my issue with it lies. If you maybe made the argument they're shy, they're retiring, they don't like interaction, they like to feel secure, they don't want to feel like they're being exposed and they can be seen, and keeping them feeding is easier in a racking system, that's your argument. That is the argument that you want to make. Do not make up some fake ecology for a species that anybody can research and independently look up and disprove you as a crank idiot within 5 minutes. That's where the problem with this frigging hobby lies. That and the celebrity status of our biggest breeders, who on their YouTube channels are showing videos with rack after rack after rack after rack, thousands of opaque plastic containers. What an exciting hobby that must be, where as a person who keeps 1, 2, 3 snakes, you would choose to keep them in non-see-through containers in an aluminium rack with an heat pad where you can't see anything to do with them, or have them in a vivarium with logs, plants, lights, the works, where you can sit and admire them and you haven't got to manhandle them to be able to appreciate them. You know, that for me, if that is the position that makes me more vivs rather than tubs, then yeah, I suppose I'm guilty as charged in that regard, because I from a beginner's perspective, from the remit of the beginner, what possible bonus is there to having a racking system apart from monkey see, monkey do, copy what the big breeders are doing, because that's all I've seen, and I infer from their videos that this must be the only way that we do it and that we keep it. And I saw a post, someone posted 4 pictures of, they were relatively rudimentary looking vivariums in a 4-way stack. I really want to get them in a rack, and someone just posted on there, why? You've got 4 vivs that you could potentially, the world's your oyster, you can do what you want as long as you use your imagination, and you would choose to forego that to put them in a racking system. I mean, none of it makes any sense, and the argument regarding royals is bullshit. If you approach their viv design sensibly with hides, logs, caves and ways of obscuring direct line of sight through plants, trailers, whatever, then your animal will continue to feed. Our royal pythons in the shop are in vivs, we're open to the public, we have kids coming in, running around, going mad, banging on glass, doing all the rest of it, everything they're not supposed to, that drives me and Paul up the wall. Guess what? Our royals still feed, and we're in a public place, not a private house. So don't tell me that if you put your royal in a viv, it won't feed. You haven't designed your viv properly. And your animal's got to get over the initial shock of the move. The same way it would have to get over the initial shock of moving from one place to another, regardless of what the enclosure was it was moving into. So there are animals potentially that would lean themselves to maybe racking systems. The cooler temperature animals, the animals that are nocturnal, the fossorial species, and generally the smaller species. If we took our universal rack box size as a 33 litre really useful box, which is 30 inches long, 18 inches wide, 9 inches tall, that's still a useful amount of space, and a lot of smaller species would only be actually fitted into a vivarium of a similar size or a similar floor pan dimension. So from that I would probably go Thayer's king snake, Durango king snake, grey banded king snake, San Luis Potosi king snake, Hoochie mountain king snake, Arizona mountain king snake, Chihuahua mountain king snake. I would look at western hognose, southern hognose, eastern hognose. I would look at Kenyan samboa, rough scaled samboa, javelin samboa. I would look at what else would I look at? I would look at Thai bamboo rat snake, I'd look at mandarin rat snake, I'd look at Dionys rat snake, I'd look at twin spotted rat snake, I'd look at leopard snake, I'd look at, oh god, what else? Aesculapian rat snake, I'd look at, what else would I look at? That's a big enough list for now anyway. But they're examples. Oh, sunbeam snake, because it's a burrow, that would be a good one. The point is that maybe we have a lower temperature requirement, so such as the mandarins or the Thai bamboos. They're fossorial and they don't want to be out and about, they need a loose substrate and a gentle temperature, sunbeam snakes. Or their overall adult size is very small, any of the samboas, the hognoses, or the rosy boas, coastal, desert, Mexican and Baja. Which would be, you know, they would all be applicable, and they'd live in this 33 litre really useful box. You wouldn't be being cruel with size, and these animals would function. They can thermoregulate and move around. The argument for having a 3.5 kilo, 4 foot heavily built, as thick as my forearm, female royal python in that same box for the 30 years that she could potentially live, I don't think that we can make a argument for that. I'm sorry, I just don't think we can. when it comes to snakes, that, you know, how would they would be applicable? So if you were saying about diurnal stuff, they'd want a glass viv. Actually, no, the opposite. Things like coach whips, racers and whip snakes are diurnal, they're active, and if we give them lots of glass barriers to interact with, they will rub their faces till they bleed, trying to escape, and they charge at the glass because they don't see it, because they'll take flight. So actually I'd have the aperture quite small, thick upper lip, thick lower lip, and the sides enclosed, so that the animal knows that it can't escape in that way, and hopefully it would be less likely to rub, because these are incredibly active snakes. Plus the size of tank you would need for diurnal species is big, because generally they're more active, they're leaner in build, they actively hunt during the day, so they're going to be up and at it. So yeah, a wooden viv for that, a glass viv potentially for the arboreals, because generally they're going to be from the tropics, they need the high humidity, we don't want the tank to rot, so this is where the mechanics of the biome and how we maintain it and all the rest of it comes in. And they'll drink from the droplets that form on the side of the glass when you spray them in the morning. So there's a list of things. If you're going to use wood, then you'd have to treat it to within an inch of its life. If you want to do the vertical racking system, there is not necessarily an issue with that, but you need to be very careful with the way that you thermostatically control this system, because through physics we know heat rises, so heat builds. So we can't go up through a rack with a single thermostat and a single probe and expect every level to maintain the temperature that we've set by that, because there is the latent heat and build-up of heat from the levels underneath. So we get this sort of accruing temperature going up, which mechanically we know will happen through physics anyway, but also because we're stacking, we've got the wattage from the pad beneath and the pad beneath and the pad beneath pushing up. So you could set your probe in the middle and everything beneath it's cooler and everything above it's hotter. So realistically, for every 1 or 2 levels, 3 maximum, absolute maximum, you will need a thermostat. So when I see these single stacks that go 15 high and then people selling them online with one stat, how does that work? Yeah, I mean, just even without a vivarium in a room, you could hold a thermometer at carpet level and a thermometer at ceiling level, and there'll be a difference in temperature because heat rises and gets trapped. So once you've put a heat pad there, why would that be any different? So be very careful about the way that you arrange your rack. Make sure that your stats are in good control. Any of your cooler climate animals are going to be nearer the floor, and then common sense dictates western hognose, rosy boa, sand boa are up towards the top, where they don't mind the heat and they can take the heat. You know, they don't mind a cooler night as well, but at least they can take the heat, and mechanically we're not going to struggle, because that's what we're kind of having to provide them with anyway, because of the way that the room is. Yeah, I mean, tubs have got their place when it comes to acclimatization, getting stuff settled, getting stuff off display, settling it, getting it feeding. But as a permanent solution, not so much. That wasn't what it was conceived for. It was conceived for a professional application that hobbyists and beginners took on because they wanted to emulate their video heroes that they'd seen, and bastardized the original concept of what they were going to be used for. Everything within our things generally is going to be you know, temporary in shops, wholesalers, importers. The breeders, yeah, they're doing it permanently, but you know, they're operating essentially under battery farm conditions, where they're trying to produce as many babies from as many animals as possible. Anybody who sees acre after acre after acre of racking box can't argue differently. And then if you're pulling giant snakes out of said racks, or monitor lizards out of said racks, you can't make an argument that this is for the fucking benefit of the animal. Where's your common sense? You know, you'd be a moron if you argued that, you know? So yeah, the beginners took it and twisted it and decided that they wanted to do it when there was no need, and something's been lost along the way, which is sitting back and being able to enjoy a well-designed viv. sitting back and watching your animals in an evening without necessarily having to pull a box out and then handle it and then put it back, which are all stressors, all markers for stress. Whereas if an animal can come out and roam around its tank and you're sat having a cup of tea or coffee and you're just admiring it and you're not bothering it and it's quite happily roaming around, that's a natural behaviour. In your hands, it's not a natural behaviour, you know? So yeah, the thing is, people will decide what they want to do. They will decide the standards of care that they want to maintain. But what I won't have and I will not take is people falsifying the ecology of a species because it's convenient or it means excusing their husbandry. And that's not on. If you're going to make the argument about what it's about. I don't want to sacrifice the space. I want to keep as many animals as I can in as small a place as possible. I want to spend as little as I can per enclosure as possible. You know, these are the markers, the real way that things have been sort of decided. Not always for the benefit of the snake. Honestly, yes, it is. Fuck off. Because it's not for the benefit of the snake. It's for the benefit of you. Your royal will feed in a viv. You just don't want to put it in a viv. You don't want to give it that amount of space. And people see the prices of animals and they want as many animals as they can to be able to then start projects. And it's the money that's the driver rather than the species, which is why we've seen the explosion of corns and royals and the near sort of extinction of once common species in collections and being bred and being available nowadays, and the rise of their value as such. But now the bubble's gone on the royals and the corns and the boas and the retics, then these guys are going to be looking for new investment channels, and if they think for 1 second the interesting colubrids are going to bring them a good financial yield, they're going to be all over them. And then, you know, it's a cycle. You can't, they're like vermin, these people. You can't get short of them. So I know I've segued a bit there. That's a bit of my bile coming up just to be seen. But yeah, it is what it is. I've given you a list of species there. They would be applicable. You'd be able to keep them at decent, you know, reasonable temperatures, not too high. You can grade them from the cool up to the top. So your mandarins, your coxeye, then maybe your mountain kings, your Mexican kings, then your little rat snakes, and then you're going up into your hognoses, rosy boas, sand boas, up in the top of your rack. So you are going to have to sort of design maybe or think about the species you want to keep and then grade them for temperature and pre-decide where they are going that rack, because mechanically if you did it the other way around it'd be impossible. You wouldn't be able to achieve it. So you definitely have to think about that stuff. I hope that was of use, Victor. I know it was a bit of a ramble. Try my best, you know. So yeah, we'll see you all soon. We'll answer another question in the next few days. Cheers, guys.